It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're in our third segment this morning, and our topics so far this morning have included looking at our national debt and the level at which we are endangering our national security as a result of that. You know, I read you a quote from Thomas Jefferson, in which he expressly and quite succinctly told us that having a debt that extends beyond a 20-year period or the lifetimes of that generation that is incurring the debt is a risk to the safety and security of the nation, as is a central private bank. Well, guess what, folks? We've failed on both those accounts. I encourage you to get an opportunity to take a quick look at that episode. That was our first show today. The second topic we talked about was forfeiture laws in the United States and how law enforcement, cities, towns, and governments have run amok in civilly seizing the property of American citizens without charge, without prosecution, and without conviction. And it's for all kinds of excuses. What's happening is they're taking your homes and your cars and your bank accounts and your money, your family jewelry, kicking your family into the street, selling those assets, and then funding their own internal budgets with it. With all due respect, I believe that qualifies as a conflict of interest. This segment, we're going to talk about the fact that there is no actual debt ceiling between now and February. As part of the budget deal that was passed 2 days ago, the debt ceiling was increased, but it wasn't increased in the traditional way. Normally what happens is when the debt ceiling is reached, they negotiate back and forth. What are they going to allow to be borrowed and so forth and so on. And when they approve that new debt ceiling, they say, okay, so you can borrow another $1 trillion. Our current debt is $16.5 trillion. So again, the ceiling kicks in at $17.5 trillion. You cannot borrow more than $17.5 trillion, right? Well, in addition to the fact that the president was given the right now to determine what the new debt ceiling will be, they didn't actually put a cap on what the president can borrow between now and February 7th, the next time that this comes up, because this was supposed to be an extension, not a full renewal for the year. The problem is that's basically giving President Obama a blank check. And with all due respect to everyone involved, I don't think anyone who is intellectually honest would even hazard a guess as to whether or not he's going to handle that responsibly. I mean, here's a man who's borrowed $7 trillion already in 5 years. Our entire national debt prior to his arrival on the scene was only $10 trillion. So remember that he's already borrowed 70% of everything that we owe just in his 5 years alone. How much more damage can he do between now and February 7th? Because they didn't put a ceiling on it. They just suspended the enforcement of it. Now, if you had a child who you gave a family credit card to, and you told your child, this is only for, limited usage. I know you're going off to college, and you may run into a scenario where, you blow a tire and you need a set of tires real quick, or, but it's for limited use now. And your son or your daughter says, oh, that's great. I'll treat it with great respect because I know that I don't have the money to really pay you back. So I want to make sure that I am honoring you're giving me this card because it may mean the difference between survival and not. And you give one to your daughter, and you give one to your son, and they both go off to university. And your son, the bill comes in, and you see every once in a while he puts some kind of an emergency. He ran out of gas, and he puts $50 in the tank. Every once in a while, you see that there's a charge on there from the university bookstore because he took on a class and they demanded a book, and he wasn't really fully prepared to pay the $120 for the book, which should have cost $11, but that's a whole nother story. But then your bill comes in, and your daughter, you look at that and you say, I'm seeing bar tabs on here. And I'm seeing clothing stores, and it looks like you spent $125 for a pair of blue jeans. And you don't have a job, and we're paying for your schooling, and we're paying for you to be housed there, and we're giving you a stipend every month in cash to pay for your meals. And it feels like you're abusing our generosity. And she says, well, I just ran into a pinch and I was going to a place and I had to have a pair of jeans, but there's 3 pairs of jeans on here at $125 apiece. Well, it was an urgent matter and I had to take care of it. Okay, so as parents, we let it go because we hope and believe that our daughter really is not taking us for a ride. And then the next month's bill comes in, and we notice again that there are some outrageous charges on there. She went out and bought a new cell phone, and she bought the best one she could find, and it was $400. And she rented a car for a week and put it on our card. And there's a massive bill on there from a restaurant for $800. We ask her, what was all this spending? Well, I took my friends out to dinner. You did? You paid the whole bill? Yeah. Well, you didn't really pay the bill. You gave us the bill. Would we at that point in time say to her, listen, we're going to cap the amount of money that you can spend because you've shown us time after time after time that you are not responsible, that you really are not interested in ethical behavior regarding this spending, that you're using us. Would that not be appropriate? I mean, would we say to her, listen, here's an American Express card and there's no limit, and we're going to trust you one more time? I don't think so. At least I wouldn't. I mean, I love my children, but I won't be played for a fool, even by my own. The problem is that in this instance, between now and February 7th, and remember now, we've got all of November, all of December, and all of January, a full 3 months, plus, the remainder of October and the first week of February. And we have no idea how much money they're going to spend. They could theoretically borrow the $1.1 trillion the president asked for, and then come back in February and say, we need $1 trillion more. David Williams, he's the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, and he was interviewed on this topic, and he had a pretty telling comment. He said, suspending the debt ceiling without a dollar amount is proof that Congress is taking a major step backward in their fiscal responsibility. A real dollar figure is a constant reminder to taxpayers and Congress that the country is broke. This was specifically done to hide the real debt from taxpayers. I would agree. The problem is that our legislators, our alleged representatives, have been getting away for generations with racking up debt and avoiding the threat of default without actually voting for a debt limit increase. And to make matters worse, they have completely abdicated any level of responsibility that they had to us as the taxpayers and the voters in addition to the fact that they've given him a debt increase with no cap and no spending limit, but they've also given him from February 7th onward the ability to determine what that debt is, and now instead of their approving it, he can declare unilaterally, this is what I'm going to borrow, and Congress has to do a 2/3 majority vote to override it. Find me anywhere in the Constitution where that is a qualified or even remotely quantifiable theory. The principle of our government is that we have 3 divisions of government that actually act as checks and balances and watchdogs over each other. Congress's job, especially the House, is to be the manager of the purse strings, the banker in the monopoly game, if you will. The reason for that is because the founders accurately assessed that they were the closest to the people. There's 435 of them. They handle relatively small geographic footprints and therefore relatively small populations. They represent smaller groups of individuals who have, theoretically, greater access to them to say, this is what we want, and we expect you to represent us before the body. By the House of Representatives giving that authority up, first of all, it's not constitutional for them to do so. And I have to question whether or not there will not be some legal flags thrown on this play between now and February 7th. In fact, I pray that there are. I'm hoping, I don't have the wherewithal and the resources and the materials to do it, but I'm hoping that there are some organizations out there who will actually stand up and say, this is illegal and it's unconstitutional. You don't have the authority to give that authority up. You've been delegated as the person who has that authority, but you do not have the right to hand that authority to someone else, much less the one person who you are supposed to be prohibiting from excessive spending in the first place. I mean, it's almost tragic. If you think about it, you know, you hear the Republicans talk so bad about this administration, and yet when it came down to the final clinch, they fought so hard over this thing about Obamacare and the budget, and they fought and held out and, you know, almost brought the country to the point of failing to increase the debt limit, which I agree was vastly over dramatized. But the simple truth is this: if they were as dedicated in their march to contain this government, then why would they do the 2 things that would completely violate their own principles, ideas, and concepts? One, give them a blank check between now and February, and two, abdicate their role as the keeper of the purse strings. To me, it's inconceivable. And I got to wonder, is anyone in the nation going to say, you know what, we've got to get a court decision on whether or not Congress even has the authority to do this? I don't think they do. And I think I could make a legitimate case, and I'm no lawyer, but I think I could make a very legitimate case that the authority which we have delegated to the House can in no way, shape, or form be subdelegated to the president, who it's supposed to be controlling. It's a conflict of interest. And it's malfeasance on the part of the House to authorize and approve that. It's also malfeasance on the part of the Senate to not bring the House to task to say, excuse me, but fellas, I don't think you're allowed to do that. Now, I don't expect that out of a Harry Reid, who was so far down the ideological path, the guy has lost all context of reality. But in a perfect world, if the people who represent us were actually doing their jobs, the Senate would have come forward and said, excuse me, Mr. Boehner, I don't think you really have the right to negotiate that authority away. In fact, an ethical, moral president who was truly interested in the best interests of America instead of achieving his own ideological desires, and instead of trying to achieve some kind of an agenda that is apparently intended to scrape our guts from the inside out and empty our viscera as a nation, he would have said, I'm sorry, but I can't sign that bill. You got to take that clause out. I don't expect self-checks by a tyrant. I do expect that the three equal balanced heads of each of the divisions of government are supposed to do their job of checking and balancing against each other. I do expect that the judiciary would have stepped in and said, with all due respect, we're going to give you an unsolicited legal opinion. You can't do that. Did no one check with the courts? Is there no legal representation that the House can turn to, that the Senate can turn to, and say, is this doable? I mean, they're all lawyers anyway, but I get it. They're not constitutional lawyers. They're just they're the leeching kind, the tick kind, the blood-sucking leeches kind. But somebody in the legal department at the House and the Senate should have raised their hand and said, excuse me, gentlemen, I got to throw a flag on this play here. There's no way that you can legally abdicate your authority to control the purse strings to the president, the one person that you're supposed to be protecting us from. It's called, ladies and gentlemen, malfeasance. And it is a criminal offense. Who in America has the resources, the skills, and the talents to put this matter before the judiciary, who I'll grant you I have no faith in, and ask them to make a ruling between now and February 7th that this cannot stand? That we cannot and will not allow this. Believe me, it'll take months for this thing to even get to the point where, even if it were fast-tracked, a court could make a decision. So between now and February, all we can hope for, all we can pray for, is that this president, who has already shown such an inclination to damage the nation that it's incomprehensible to most Americans, that he doesn't go completely hog wild. But if we don't get a halter on this wild pony before February 7th, he's got 3 more years to do an incredible level of damage to the nation. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host here every day. You can catch us on the web by visiting our website at americasvoicenow.org. You can find our Facebook page where we post up stories and articles and these videos every day. You can find that by going to facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And then you can also find this and every other program that we do on our YouTube channel. Share them with your friends. Listen to one, catch one every once in a while. We try to keep them to less than a half hour apiece so that you don't get everybody's busy. I get it. But you can find those by going to youtube.com/America's Voice Now. You can also find them posted on our website every day after the show. You can find them in the latest news section. Jump on there, catch a video, share it with your friends. We appreciate it. Thanks so much. We'll be right back. When we come back, we're going to touch on this last issue of immigration. This is the next push. We'll be right back. It's a worrisome day, folks.